is Jessie Holder Tourtellotte, and I'm the adapting playwright of this version of the Trojan Women. Okay, so the four central named women of the play are Hecuba, the Queen of Troy, or at least she was the Queen of Troy, Helen, who has been known as Helen of Sparta and now, and in modern history, known as Helen of Troy, who was the Queen of Sparta, who left her home and her throne with one of the young Trojan princes to come to Troy, and Andromache, who is Hecuba's daughter-in-law, the wife of Hector, who was the eldest prince of Troy, and Cassandra, who is one of the younger princesses of the Trojan. Essentially, the play centers on the ends of their stories as we know it. These are people who, Hecuba is Cassandra's mother. She would have raised her. She has other children. Depending on what version of this myth you read, there's one that claims that she and her husband had 90 sons. We're not talking about that, because that's not really, that doesn't feel human. That doesn't feel texturally human. The children of theirs that Euripides' conception focuses on and comments on them having are Hector, Paris, Troilus, Deiphobus, Cassandra, and Polyxena. Hecuba is powerful, she is strong, she is wise in many, many ways, but she has gone through immense loss in the last several days in a profound way. So there's a lot of rage and a lot of resentment, and it comes out as pettiness even at times. There's lashing out and there's an exhaustion. She very much begins the play already knowing her fate. She has no intention of surviving this story, because why would she? She's lived her life, she's raised her children, she's gonna settle the accounts, essentially. Helen is kind of the mysterious figure of the group. Do you believe her story? Do you not believe her story? Do you buy that she's sincere? Do you not buy that she's sincere? We are looking at this play through a modern lens on classical literature and looking at the pitiable, and every myth tells us that Helen was profoundly young when she was married off to the king of Sparta, and it was by tournament, because there was this fear that this rumor of her being the daughter of Zeus and part divine and the most beautiful woman in the world, called the most beautiful woman in the world at the age of like 7 and 11, was going to cause war that led to these intense treaties and her marriage. So we have to treat that as non-consensual from a modern perspective. And we have to understand that most mythology points to Menelaus not being a kind person, not being a good person, not being a good husband. And to Aphrodite, the goddess of love, if you believe in versions of the story or listen to versions of the story, it doesn't matter if you take literally versions of the story in which the gods manipulate or not. It matters to understand what the intention or meaning of those active manipulations would be for the creator. So with the myth of the judgment of Paris being involved, wherein Aphrodite gives Paris the love of the most beautiful woman in the world, if you were to believe that or think that's the inception of this story, great, that's literal. If you don't, and you ask why did writers say that's what happened, well, it's because we're saying this is sincere love. We're saying they're in love. So it has to be treated as an elopement of her coming to Troy. Andromache, referred to often as sorrowful Andromache, is, one of the primary figures of pitiable and admirable strength in this era of mythology. Devastated and heartbroken at the loss of her husband and convinced that things are as bad as they can get, and then they just continue to get worse for her throughout this play, and she's going to figure out exactly how bad the world can actually be as she fights to maintain any sense of hope, because she has a young son she's responsible for. And Cassandra in mythology is pretty consistent as a figure. This is a young priestess of Apollo who has been blessed with the gift of prophecy and cursed never to be believed. And in the wake of the Trojan War and the amount of conflict and violence, and seeing the consequence of her knowing that the horse was not a gift and is not a good choice to bring into the city and not being believed, and then her absolutely brutal treatment at the hands of one of the Greek generals, her mind is broken. Her reason and her wit are completely broken at the start of the show. Real study, humble study of what exists and thorough knowledge, and then as writing, making sure that if you follow fantasy lore, there's a concept called rules of magic. You have to have rules of magic that are very, very consistent. For poetry and playwriting, you need to have rules of verse. You need to understand which rules you're taking very literally and seriously at all times, and what rules are flexible, and be consistent with how you adhere to those rules throughout a project. So that meant knowing when I was writing in prose, when I was writing in iambs, when I was going to enjam a line, and having a justification for every one of them. And the way I justified that was having side-by-sides of Euripidean work and Shakespearean work, because Shakespearean work is what inspired the Gilbert Murray rhyming verse translation in the early 1900s that produced the primary study for this. So like I said, the Athenian constructs under which the playwright was writing were very limiting. So instead of taking a scene in which Cassandra and the chorus simply report what has occurred or what will be occurring with King Agamemnon, by adding King Agamemnon to the scene, some truly long speeches, long declamatory speeches were able to be broken up and made human and dialogue heavy, so that we're hopefully capturing a contemporary audience's auditory sensibility. It also makes it more contemporary actor friendly to give them more to do. What we understand as modern acting technique, and the goal of modern acting technique, is connection for catharsis, is authenticity and truth for connection with the audience, behavior that produces a response. We have to acknowledge that over time, humans may have figured out better ways to do things. And so the idea was to keep the core of what Euripides did that is beautiful, and look at some of the things that playwrights of later generations learned how to do with similar stories.